Three, two, one. So what people are seeing right now, Lewis, is like a live feed interpretation of what learning how to podcast is like in
I
real
see what you
life.
mean
It's
now.
like a proper fluid way, like I say fluid. It's a very real interpretation of learning to podcast in real
Right.
time. And it seems like we're hitting one of these milestones like every single week. We learn how to record, we learn how to do it natively, and this week we received our first comment.
Yeah, which is absolutely massive news. But not only that, in terms of like teaching people how to talk podcast, like the videos are only about 2 hours as well. So you're going to learn how to podcast in absolutely no time by the end of watching season 1 of Guide to 21st Century.
Yeah, and it was only a couple of weeks ago that we started asking people to actually comment on the videos.
All of a
It
sudden,
just so happened someone commented on the video before that, which was absolutely
yeah.
massive. And we spent a good 15, 20 minutes on the phone trying to decide how to,
How to
how to
reply
answer
to
that
that? Yeah, we
comment
were very proud
in
of
a
that one.
mad fit of
Yeah.
excitement. Pure adrenaline.
Yeah.
We feel like we sort of decided we were going to do a podcast, but we never actually realised what it would be like to have someone watching or talking to us on the internet. That wasn't things that we thought of in the future.
Right, yeah, exactly. But when we got that comment, both of us, we said to each other, like, this is the first time it's really sank in. Like, I know that we've been recording videos and doing these conversations and putting them onto YouTube and stuff like that, but for some reason, the idea of someone actually watching them just didn't seem possible,
Yeah, staying in the video long enough to
Right.
actually develop a thought on what we were saying was mind-boggling to say
Yeah,
the least.
but really, really happy with that though. And like more comments, keep them coming, because we really, really enjoyed the experience of getting to hear someone else's view.
Yeah. So if you didn't know, this is Guide to the 21st Century, a topical podcast between two friends, Lewis and I, discussing topical issues and trying to navigate the minefield that is life in the 21st century.
That's right. So each week, Scott and I have been going away and thinking about a topic that's been on our mind that week, that's either in the news or something that's been kicking around, and we'll both bring that to the podcast format on Monday mornings, and we'll have a little discussion, disseminate some of our views, and hopefully we'll come to a bit more of a conclusion about this issue than where we started.
Yeah, so like we said at the beginning of the episode, if you guys have something to say, if you have any input, any corrections that you have during the episode, please feel free to comment on them. They make us unbelievably happy and filled with giddy excitement.
Yes, and you're guaranteed a reply, so...
Exactly. So, my turn to go first this
Right.
week. Recently I've been kind of thinking about this topic, and it's been maybe since about the end of last year, but it's more been brought up to light recently, because I don't know if you heard, but there's a game coming out it's just been delayed actually, called Hogwarts Legacy. So it's a game set in the Harry Potter universe, and it's basically well in the past, before Harry, before Voldemort, before all that stuff. And it's just a student that's kicking about Hogwarts, and it's a game just sort of set in that universe. And one of the game's directors was a guy called Troy Leavitt, and it came out that he had a personal YouTube channel well before he became the director of this game. And some of the videos that he had on that channel were sort of anti-feminist, and they were pro something that was known as Gamergate. I don't know if you ever heard what Gamergate was.
Vague awareness.
But it was basically this movement where pro-Gamergaters were saying that things like feminism and PC and things like that were starting to creep their way into video games and kind of influence them in a way. And they were against that. So he spoke out in sort of pro-Gamergate sort of fashion. And more recently as well, not even like, well, just before that story, another Harry Potter creator, J.K. Rowling, was under a bit of scrutiny for opinions that she voiced on the internet about some of the issues that are surrounding trans people just now. She was labelled as transphobic. She was, I don't know if she identifies or not, but she was labelled as a TERF. And so anyway, this guy Troy Leavitt, he went on to resign from the game. He actually took his name away from it. He came up with a reason that he had like family issues going on in the background and stuff like that.
Okay.
Brought up a reason that was quite transparently false, it seems like, in my opinion. He's been taken off the game because social media got a hold of these old YouTube videos on his channel.
And he's been cancelled.
Yeah, and he's basically sort of been cancelled. So I'm not really specifically interested in Troy Leavitt or J.K. Rowling as individuals and these specific events, but I'm more sort of interested in the events in the thought process as a whole. So there's a lot of people that have been claiming that you should boycott the game, when he was in charge of it. People shouldn't buy the game because he's sort of lending his is talent to it, I guess, if
Right,
you will.
right, right. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people after the J.K. Rowling came up with their comments that said, you should read Harry Potter or anything like that. So I'm more sort of interested in the phenomenon as a whole of separating art from the artists
Right, okay.
that create them and help to produce
Mm-hmm.
them. So just straight off the bat, initial thoughts. How do we feel about these creators that are expressing their opinions like this? And should we let it affect the way that we feel about the art they produce?
Okay, well, this kind of comes down to what a small point to begin with that we usually talk about, and that is like, see, we obviously, the whole point of this channel is that we obviously clearly agree in free. You're allowed to freely disperse your opinion, and like you can. I think you can basically talk about any view as long as you're being like a rational person, approaching this from a point of either learning or conversation instead of just being like abrasive or inflammatory. I think it's kind of ridiculous that people are getting shot down for that. Like, for instance, in the case of that game dev, like, I don't know if he had like videos from years ago that were like, like offensive towards like women and that type of thing. I have to. It's a tough one. It's because that has to be acknowledged, right? Even if it was years ago, there has to be some awareness of it. But I guess I guess to answer your question, the main point for me is most of this has to do with how you approach it, right? Like there's a way of approaching all these issues, and I think you and I if you look back at our catalogue of videos thus far, you'll see that we're not scared of talking about these certain subjects, but you definitely have to be delicate about it, right?
I think you have to err on the side of sensitivity. You can bring up these issues, but do so in a way that's like kind of respectful at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So to be clear, I haven't gone back and watched his videos, although I have read the article that J.K. Rowling had written, and the views that I was seeing circulating that were sort of, there was words being thrown out like TERF and transphobic, and they weren't necessarily words that I agreed with. In the article, I didn't actually get the feeling that she was being transphobic or that she was speaking out against trans people. It was just a topic that didn't sort of align with the views of the radical people that were sort of responding to it. So to be clear, I haven't watched this Troy Leavitt's videos on YouTube, but I can imagine that he wasn't. The videos about feminism probably weren't directly sexist and more criticising feminism as a movement or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And his video about Gamergate was probably about how he thought there was good opinions and good views that were being spread during that time. Now, again, like I said, I haven't watched him, so I'm not defending him in any way, shape, or form. But that's my knee-jerk reaction, my gut feeling when it comes to these things.
Yeah, that is kind of, to be honest with you, that's kind of what I assumed when we approached the subject. I kind of wanted to preface it and say that as much as like your intention for whatever you make, some form of art, whether it's like a video or a game, obviously has a huge amount to do with it and how it's perceived by people. But assuming that it's a reasonable person that's making these views, not trying to go out there and hurt someone's, hurt someone in some way or another, I don't get why people do this. Where like, I understand why some people would think that, I suppose, if there's a creator that's making some form of medium, whether it's like a movie or art or whatever like that, if they had strong views, that they would probably worry about those views seeping into the medium that they're producing. So I guess I can imagine, like, I don't know, it's because like, let's use J.K. Rowling as an example, because I think that's probably just because you've mentioned her. Like, I guess if she's like sharing these views about what she thinks about trans people, and by the way, I've read them as well, like, I don't think there was clearly nothing offensive about what she said, or at least there was nothing she was trying to be offensive about. She was trying to have a reasonable conversation. But the point was that, so yeah, J.K. Rowling's going out there to have this conversation with people, and bugger.
I think the idea is that she's not going out to offend anyone. She's going out to express these sort of opinions, and they're not necessarily exactly reflected in Harry Potter.
Well, yeah, that's sorry, that's exactly where I was going. Yeah, like, it would be one thing for people to think that J.K. Rowling was like sharing these views, and it's like, oh, the next Harry Potter book we're going to talk about, they've got like a new curse exclusively for trans people or something like that, or like they're going to talk about how it's a type of lycanthropy or something stupid. But these things don't happen. Like, people most of the time are quite good at separating their opinions from their medium. And I do have a problem when like, for instance, like in episode 1, like propaganda does start seeping into mediums, and I can understand why people would want to stop an artist or creator, like strong arming their beliefs into a form of art form they're producing. But I don't really believe that happens most of the time, and I don't really see evidence of it as well. So it's kind of strange why. So I'm not even convinced that is the reason why people do it, because like when J.K. Rowling came out with these views, people weren't getting upset at her because they thought she's going to start writing about this. They were just getting upset at her
because she thought them.
Literally.
Because this is like what
she thought the wrong thing.
Exactly. And I want to kind of highlight and make it clear that the issues that these people are like talking about are sort of completely separate from the art that they're creating.
Right.
You know, it's not like J.K. Rowling is like using this opinion or thought process, or Troy Leavitt is using this opinion and he's sort of like putting it into the game, or there's some unethical manner in which he's creating this art. These people are like totally separate from the creations themselves, are totally separate from the opinions, and it's not necessarily true that these opinions will then be reflected in the material.
Right.
I mean, they might be, but I'm highly doubtful that something like Gamergate is going to pop up in the Hogwarts Legacy game.
Yeah.
There might be sort of references to people being progressive in the game. Maybe you can play as a trans character, or you can do whatever it is you want to do at your character creation screen, but it doesn't seem like they're being angry at the fact that he's going to put this in the game. They're just angry at the fact he has this opinion and he is making a game. They're angry at him as a person, and they want him to be, cancelled because of that.
I think this is also a huge problem, and I think I understand why it's probably a bit more of a problem when it comes to like comedy. Isn't because I hear like isn't there like lots of like, these days it feels like more and more comedians are getting cancelled for saying things that are offensive. Like just the other day, what's she called, a famous British comedian, she's called Jo
Jo Brand.
I think Jo Brand. Yeah, she made a joke about, I can't remember, it was like instead of going to the polls, like going to your local Tory house and covering them in acid. It was something like that, but and like it was obviously a bit too far, and like it was probably a bit, and she admitted afterwards that the joke was a bit extreme because it was like, it involved violence and stuff like that. But basically there was people trying to cancel Jo Brand for making this joke, and the idea was that in here we're not even talking about like putting it into an art style or making it into a medium or like subconsciously expressing, like a type of thought, which I think is what most of these people are trying to control, is like a type of thought. It was just literally trying to make a joke, making fun of people that take things to extremes, and all of a sudden that became just enough of a reason for people to just like pile drive onto her. And Jo Brand, from my understanding, she is someone that seems to represent the left, and from my from I think, I don't, is this correct, would you say that most of this kind of comes from the left? Cancel culture is an invention that's kind of come from the more liberal side of the equation.
I think they're definitely the ones that are listened to anyway. When you hear about cancel culture, the cancel culture that you hear about is always to do with diversity of thought. It seems like, because if you had the extreme on the right trying to cancel stuff, they think about the issues that they feel they're like racist or fascist, stuff like that. If these are ideas that are kind of universally disregarded,
yes,
so it's, no one pays any attention to them. Whereas these ideas of like cancel culture that are coming from the left seem to be it seems to be like a new wave of like extreme that's kind of coming from that side. So it's not quite at the level yet where it's being disregarded. It's actually getting quite a bit of traction right now.
Yeah.
So I would say it's fair to say it's from the left.
Yeah, I don't. It's a weird one, isn't it? It's because like it's with all the issues we discuss, like it has a core that's good, because the idea here obviously is that we're removing a platform or people or like a vehicle for hate, exactly, from some type of public platform, whether that's like an art form or just like a social media account or a video or whatever. The idea is that we're shutting them up. It's because they might be spreading, fucking like terroristic violence, so they might be like talking about killing animals, or they might be like a neo-Nazi or like some stupid incel, you know, like these actually are one of the few times where it's a good idea, I think, to shut someone up. It's because like that person's dangerous, you know, that person actually could have quite a negative impact on society through like violent means
Sure.
and violent, just like the way they think. And the whole concept of cancellation, I don't know whether that's the best way of doing it by the end of the day, but I can understand the intention. It's an inherently good thing. But I can remember just like several years ago, it was like the main social media I've used for the last couple of years has been Reddit, and Reddit went through its first like purge of the big subreddits that were considered like non-PC anymore. And like there's
Right.
it used to be like the category was as a subreddit for anything, and they were getting rid of all like the obvious ones. Like there was like for instance, there's like white supremacist groups. There was like groups about like death and like necrophilia and stuff like that, because there's a subreddit for everything, just like there's a page on Facebook for everything. So Reddit for the first time systematically went through and just deleted all these communities basically. And I can still remember at the time thinking to myself, like, it's one thing getting rid of this, but like my problem with this, like being able to dissociate art with the artist and like cancel culture, is that it's just impossible to draw a line. How can you possibly like there's no distinction for where it becomes universally agreed that this is dangerous to some people saying this is dangerous, and those people have the loudest voice, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the problem that's arising now. You know what you see, that I think there are things out there that are very obviously dangerous. You know, if someone's on these websites or they're on YouTube and they're spreading, you know, racist lies about people, if they're actively telling you that whites are better than blacks, you know, that they're the people that are telling you that people shouldn't be allowed to be gay and stuff like that. This is very obvious hate, and it's clear to see why that's dangerous, because if that changes the mind of even one person who is for these things, you know, if someone isn't a racist but they're watching YouTube videos that then convince them that maybe actually black people are worse than white people, you
Right.
know, that's very clearly wrong.
Yes.
And things like that shouldn't have a platform anywhere. You know, there shouldn't be a platform for just outright hate for no reason, right? But the thing that's happening now is that the line between hate and discussion, the line between hate and criticism, is now becoming extremely blurred.
Yes.
And, you know, the people who are advocating for this cancel culture, their line is way further over to what the vast majority of people is. You know, I think a reasonable person would read J.K. Rowling's article, you know, and they wouldn't come away from it thinking she was a transphobe. You know, you can think that she's wrong. You can think the things that she's saying are wrong. You can maybe go away and try and find some evidence to show that what she's saying is maybe incorrect or anything like that. But she's not like just spewing hate into the world. You know, she's not encouraging anyone to hate trans people. At one point in the article, she even says, "Of course, trans lives matter, and of course, trans rights are human rights." And I don't know if it's the same for this guy on Hogwarts Legacy or not, but it seems like the activists who are trying to get these things cancelled, you know, the guy that tweeted out this YouTube video originally was basically saying to people, "This guy's a sexist. You know, this guy doesn't like feminism. He's a sexist." And it's like, that's not necessarily true. Maybe that's what you think, and maybe your line for cancelling something is like way further over, but it certainly isn't for me anyway. You know, and I don't even necessarily think that the game that he's creating and the opinion that he holds, like, they don't have to align
Yeah,
in any
right.
way,
No,
shape,
no,
or
I agree
form.
with you there, definitely. The thing that I kind of find like confusing about this is because like we're talking about how like, both you and I read like the article by J.K. Rowling several times now, at different times in the past, and like we probably read it on different platforms as well, and we probably like had a little read of the article and then we went to the comments. It's because like I read the article a little bit and I'm like, what's the opinion here? Sniff it out. I'm like, oh, okay, let's see what people think of it. So then I went to the comments immediately, and like that's the thing. The comment section that I were reading were not reasonable people. You know, this was people like calling like J.K. Rowling like, oh, she's just a witch, she's a turf bitch type of thing. You know, like she has no idea what she's talking about. Like, can't believe we used to look up to that woman type of thing. And it's like, so before like years afterwards, or like many months anyway afterwards, before I actually went to research what J.K. Rowling was actually talking about. I kind of assumed that J.K. Rowling just was this unreasonable person that was like really anti-trans, because that genuinely was the opinion I got from the social media site I was using at the time. It's because the comments were just universally negative. So that's kind of the thing I guess I'm confused about. It's like, I agree with you that most normal people would agree that it wasn't a stupid view, or people aren't trying to say that, you know, this will affect the future works that she does or something like that. So why is it particularly on the internet, does this like phenomenon of cancel culture and like just like hate building on hate, why is that so virulent? You know, why do we see that so much? It's because, do you agree with me that like that at least online you'll see people having very, very strong reactions to points that probably if you're talking to someone in real life, they wouldn't actually feel that way, right?
So I think that in order for you to go online and to type out a response for this, you have to feel strongly about it. You know, nobody read J.K. Rowling's article. Like, I read the article and didn't particularly feel strongly about it one way or the other, and I wasn't going to respond because of that. You know, there was no opinion that I had that I thought was worth saying online. The only reason that somebody would, I feel, the only reason that they would go online and respond to it is if they really agreed with it or really hated it, you know. And that's why you see when a show gets reviews or whatever, you see someone talking about a TV show they've watched, you know, Game of Thrones, you see a lot of hate for it, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that like don't actually feel that like strongly about it. They're like, well, it was a mess season, so they don't go on and talk about it. But the people that do, like, in order for you to be motivated to put your opinion out onto the internet, you have to feel very strongly either really like it or really hate it. So when I see stuff like this online, what normally happens is it'll come to me through Twitter, and I'll see the responses first. So when it came to this J.K. Rowling tweet, I seen a couple of like celebrities that I follow that were tweeting out about it, and they were sort of tweeting out against it. They were kind of activists on the left that were saying that she is these things. So I seen the reaction, I seen the original tweet from J.K. Rowling or whatever it was, and the responses to that, and they're all hating. So at the point where there's this massive reaction that's kind of snowballing, I then take it upon myself to go and look at it and decide, you know, what I think. So I see all these negative reactions, I jump into it, I read it, and then I'll make a decision, sort of thing. So that's how I look towards it. So these things normally need to get a bit of traction before I even like see it in my social media.
Yeah, exactly. I know what you mean. Do you not find though that like finding an instance of a comment section, it's because I used Reddit and you probably use Twitter to read the comments. Do you not find that finding an actual instance that takes a view from an artist, or like a discovery that an artist had certain views in the past, have you ever seen a comment section which actually discusses this? Because I don't think I have. I think I've only ever just
certainly not on Twitter. Not on 140 characters.
Well, exactly. That's the problem in itself. So, I guess what I think I kind of have a feeling what happens is that like it gets like a critical mass of like negativity, and then like see after that point, see if you do feel positively about it, you're not going to comment. It's because you know you're just going to get given like vitriol, you know, because like and then all of a sudden like the hate that's being pushed onto the person that made this post in the first place, or this person that made a statement, that's going to be on you. So like you stay silent after that. So like I think there's almost this like unfair polarizing effect where like
social pressure, I would call it.
Exactly. Yeah, like there's this social pressure to feel a certain way about it. So like, the people that don't feel a certain way, they say, "Oh fuck, I'm getting the hell out of here." And the people that do agree with it, they just start hammering the keyboards, right?
Yeah, you also have like all these people that are being so negative about it, and if you don't have particularly strong feelings for it, it's just not worth your hassle.
Yeah.
You know, you have to feel very, very strongly for it to even respond to these things, which is why it ends up in like an argument. So there are a couple of like issues I see here. First of all, on Twitter, you've got 140 characters, so you can't have any sort of long length thought. Yeah. You know, it's a short and sweet thing where you can't expand on any of your points, you can't explain any of them correctly. Second of all, you've got an issue in communication where people, and you know, we're as guilty of this as anyone, of not articulating yourself the way that you actually think.
Right.
So you'll tweet something out and you'll say something and it's not the way you meant to say it. You know, how many times have you been speaking to someone and you've said something and they've taken it the wrong
Yeah.
way and you've gone, oh, that's
Let
not
me
what I meant
reiterate.
there actually.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a breakdown where either I've said something incorrectly or you've heard what I've said and thought I meant something
Right.
else. So there's that as well. Then we also put on top of the fact that the people that are wanting to comment feel strongly in one direction, and I think you're much more likely to comment if you feel negatively about something than you are positively. You know, when you see like if I go back to the example of Game of Thrones, you're much more likely to comment online about it if you hated
Right.
it rather than if you loved it. So the reaction first of all is negative, and then it takes a strong person who feels strongly about it to react positively. Now, these two people could not be further from each other in terms of their thoughts. So one's extreme one side, one's extreme on the other, where it's, it's love and hate or left and right. And because those two people are so far apart and they have so little space to communicate, and on top of that, they're bad at communicating in the first
Right.
place, it's just a really bad echo chamber
Yeah.
that eventually descends into, well, you're a fucking Nazi.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know?
So I guess what you're saying is that you think a lot of the reason we're seeing like this environment that we see today, and where it's like people's personal beliefs are becoming so intertwined with what they do, what they produce. That's just because of like the permittivity, of negativity in the first place online, and compounded by the fact that online it's just hard to communicate. Is that?
Yes. I think first of all you have to think very negatively about something to talk
I
about
agree with
it,
that, definitely.
or to do that. Then you have to feel very strongly about it for it, to respond to that, and then you also have so little time to communicate, so little space to communicate, and on top of that you are bad at communicating.
Yeah.
You know, all of those things just compound into like a really negative whirlpool of opinions.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, it's not only like people that feel really bad about it want to be the ones that comment the most. The thing that I think it's pretty well proven that like human beings, we're just like biologically inclined towards negativity, right? That's what like biologically that is what's more important to us, because like as much as like sitting on a nice summer afternoon in the garden sipping a beer or whatever will make you feel nice, if like a tiger's sitting in front of you, you're going to have a much stronger emotional response to the negative than you are to the positive, right? That was really badly explained there, but it kind of gives the point across that basically I think we just have much stronger emotions to negative things. So when we see a viewpoint that we have a negative view about, we're much more likely to comment, as opposed to when we see something that we like. We need to like it a huge amount to be equally inclined to comment on something that we don't like, right?
Yeah, I think the natural human reaction would be to take evasive action when something negative pops up, right? To try and correct it in some way, shape, or form. You know, if you're sitting a test, to take example, you sit a test at school and you get the answer correct, you're not going to do anything about that. You get the answer
Right, sure, okay.
You know how to do that question. Right. If you get the answer wrong, you need to revise that, because you don't know what you're doing. You know, we take corrective action when something's bad, and we try and continue the things that are good. You know. So it takes someone an awfully strong reaction to look at someone's negative reaction and say, no, actually, this is what we need to correct. It's like, you're what we need to correct now. And it's not an atmosphere that's sort of conductive for conversation, because it also takes a certain kind of person to even like aggressively comment on something like this. It's quite confrontational.
It is, yeah.
To go onto something online and to tweet about how negative it is, that's quite a confrontational thing to do. So it already comes across like the majority of the people that are doing it aren't trying to have a conversation with you. They're just trying to confront you about what you've done wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It does, and there's almost like a virtue signaling aspect to that, I think. But do you not also think that, I was just thinking there when you were talking there, sorry, like it's sometimes like commenting on something negatively, that's just really, I think that's easier than looking for the positive most of the time, isn't it? Like, I guess like if you're to like try and, I know you might disagree with this actually, but like I guess if I was to try and like think of like a bot to like farm likes or reposts or whatever, or farmer, I would just try and like program it to find like conversational issues and just say something negative. You know, some bullshit like this sucked, that was wrong, Game of Thrones season 8 sucked type of thing. You know, like these like short, condensed, like, you know, bullshit things. And I basically what I'm trying to get to is I feel that like when it comes to this kind of dogpiling effect we see here, it's actually, it's not only people struggle with communicating both sides of the argument. I think it's actually easier for people to communicate negativity, as well as the fact that they're also more inclined towards it and that it's difficult in itself. So I'm genuinely, now that we're talking about this out now, it seems that there's like an insurmountable number of effects that are leading towards this natural conclusion of people just like blindly associating one person and their beliefs and their art and their output, and then just steamrolling that with negativity. And you've got like the echo chamber on top of that. You know, like this just sounds horrible. You know,
I think it's definitely a byproduct. You know, the negativity that we see online is definitely a byproduct of social media that we were not prepared and did not envisage. You know, people created social media and they thought, oh, this will be this great thing. You know, we'll go and we'll see our friends. We'll see the pictures they post on holiday on Facebook. You know, we'll get their quippy things that are thinking about TV shows on Twitter. You know, and it's not been that this hasn't been like envisaged. It's become this like negative pool that, because it makes so much money now, they're just like trying to fix it.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're like set up for this.
No.
This kind of like social media, and then it just sort of like snowballs. So when these people are like doing this on social media, they're trying to get these things cancelled, and what is their goal in this? Because it seems like when they're trying to get something cancelled, you know, the person like J.K. Rowling expresses an opinion about trans people. Now, they disagree with it, so they try to cancel her. Is that so that she won't get money from Harry Potter? Is it so that she won't get paid for the work that she's doing? You know, are they trying to stop the money that she's getting? And if that is the case, does that extend to all jobs? You know, are you just saying that she can't get a lot of money because she thinks the wrong way, so she has to go and get like a normal job, like quote unquote? Like, what do they get out of this? You know, where are you seeing her going? Like, is your idea for like, you know, J.K. Rowling, person A online thinks J.K. Rowling is transphobic. Is the goal for them to see her working in a supermarket? Like to see her in an office? You know, it's like, if she's not getting money from Harry Potter, do you want her to do something else, or do you want to just cut her out of society? You know,
well,
throw her away on an island.
Well, that's the whole point of this kind of like cancel culture, isn't it? Is that you are literally rejected from society. Like, things in life become harder for you. You lower your social status. So that is the thing that kind of amazes me about when it comes to effectively just like cancelling people, or like fucking mob justice type of thing against people, because it's so dangerous what you're playing with right now. You can ruin people's lives. Because there's a phase a couple of years ago when like a bunch of people, like politicians and stuff, ended up getting called up because they'd made a bunch of like sexist comments when they're fucking teenagers and stuff like that, you know. And like it's valid, and it's a valid conversation, but the end result we only ever see are people just having their lives ruined, you know. And so to address what you're saying there, like, maybe this is like quite cynical, but like, see the people that do brigade people and like join this mob justice type of thing. I really think very poorly of them, actually. It's because I think that this is just a sick sense of gratification, where like they're just trying to feel a bit better about themselves. See, instead of like going out in there and fucking donating to like stop cancer, they're getting their wee dopamine hit at the end of the day by calling someone out on what they perceive to be wrong. And like, there's also we've got like this like echo chamber effect, which compounds the fact, because it's not only are you calling someone out, is that then a bunch of people are coming along and agreeing with you, and you know that that's going to happen, you know. So I kind of look at this negatively, and I think, and I do think it's for like totally the wrong reasons, and people aren't even thinking about the end game. Like, people don't care what happens there, you know.
That's the thing. These people see they're just about cancelling Harry Potter. You know, like the people that are saying this, they're like, don't buy the game because this guy has, YouTube, but his personal YouTube channel. Now, first of all, he's not the only guy that works in
Right,
the game.
exactly.
There are probably hundreds of people at this studio who are about to lose out because you think his opinions are bad. Second of all, what is he to do after the game's cancelled or after the game doesn't make any money? Maybe this guy gets fired. He resigns in this case. Maybe he doesn't get a job after this in this industry. It's like, what is your plan?
Oh, it's
for
serious,
him?
yeah.
Because I don't think they've thought past cancelling the game. They haven't thought after that. It's like, well, what do you think he should be doing? Should he go to jail? Should no one speak to him ever again? Like, what is your opinion past that? They don't seem to have thought past 5 feet in front of them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, there's kind of a lot of I don't know how applicable this is, but like we're almost like we start talking about like separating the art from the artist, but now we're kind of like, I feel we're just talking about like what mob justice is, and like the blindness of this new form of justice, in which people basically think like, let the crowd sort it out, maybe the law won't get involved. It's because they can't get involved in this type of thing, but the people will sort them out type of thing. And maybe that used to exist when people used to talk in person. Maybe that existed before the internet, where people would sit in a bar or a restaurant and chat amongst themselves, and if someone was being a fucking inflammatory idiot, you get chucked out. But now, like,
back before conversations were 25 words.
Exactly, yeah, and you could just walk away from it whenever you wanted because I'm done now. You can't. It's just a completely different dynamic, and I think there has to be. It's one of those ones I just don't know how you do fix these things. It's because like mob justice is, I genuinely think it's like such an incredibly dangerous tool that's being used just so bluntly right now. And like, that's like what I wanted to jump to kind of mention at the beginning. Like, and this is actually quite a tangent now I'm thinking about it, but if you don't mind, but I'm thinking, yeah. Oh, next week then. I'm thinking about like how like they call it aspects of mob justice, and how like mob justice tends to deal with people that are being accused of rape. So like obviously the justice system is just like, it was really hard to handle cases of rape, right? I think everyone can agree with that. It's because it's fundamentally one of those he said, she said situations. It's because we didn't have fucking cameras in the bedroom. We didn't know what happened.
Well, sometimes.
No, yeah.
Obviously, there are cases where it's obvious. I'm
talking about the cases where it's. I'm talking about the cases where it's not obvious, And like basically, what happens is you'll get two people that are walking away because the idea is that the law says that these people are proven innocent until proven guilty. And it's kind of like one of those situations where like some people will think that the evidence is so blatantly obvious, like there's no fucking way, like he or she is guilty, So if the law's not going to do anything, I'm going to do something about it. And like you end up in this scenario where like there's been lots of people involved in like sex crimes in one way or another that like end up basically being on like the wrong side of the mob, right? Because this is just the quintessential case you hear people talk about, where like all of a sudden it's like one accusation, and then like this mentality happens where all of a sudden it's like, you are no longer who you were before. You are a racist, you are a sexist, you are a homophobe. It's like you're no longer a person. You're just the views that you had at that one point in time, and it's like that gives us permission, or like gives me the ability to just like ruin your life and sleep freely at night, So I don't know. I guess that analogy is kind of coming from there, was just talking about how it's not just like art almost. It's like all form of communication we're seeing now. I guess.
So to circle it back to separating art from artists, then how do we do that more effectively? How do we separate that more effectively? Because it seems to me that these people are trying to get these things cancelled, whereas instead of kind of doing that, they could maybe use it as a weapon almost in a conversation. Where you can sort of, instead of trying to get something cancelled, why don't you just spread the education on why you think this is wrong? I think if we see these people, like for example, if we were to see Troy Leavitt or J.K. Rowling throwing these opinions into the art they created, then we can start having a conversation about, okay, they're now pushing their agenda. They're now doing something that we feel uncomfortable with, and something that audiences will probably realise. I think that if that was to happen in a game, I think an audience would realise that there would be a negative reaction if they knew it or not. But instead of trying to get these things cancelled, why don't people just, they could just tell you don't have to look at these two things and put them in the same light. Just because you like Harry Potter doesn't mean you have to listen to a fucking word J.K. Rowling says.
Exactly, yeah.
Just because she's had 20, 25 years ago, she's had an idea for a story. That's it. That's all you need to align yourself with. J.K. Rowling's not a hero because she had this idea. She's not in any sort of position of power because she had this idea. These people follow her because they created it, but you don't have to listen to her. Her opinion is no more valid than yours or anybody else's. So it seems like there's quite an obvious way to do this, where you go ahead, love Harry Potter, but just don't listen to what she says because she's clearly wrong for these reasons.
I agree with you. That question, I don't think we should be trying to separate these things. I think these things should just exist as they are. But and I agree with you. People should be cognizant enough to realise that this plus that does not equal that type of thing. They should be able to realise that because this artist has a particular view, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to affect every aspect of their entire life. And sure, you're allowed to think about their views and think they're an idiot for it at the end of the day, but I don't understand why you'd think that has to have an implicit association with what they're producing. And to that point that you said there, I think I agree with what you're saying there. Isn't the age old phrase instead of trying to shut someone up, just let them talk and everyone else will realise that they're an idiot and then they'll shut up, right? It's one of those scenarios where the louder people shout, and if you take a platform away from them, it's almost as if you're admitting there's something there. It's fuck, you don't want people to hear that. That's dangerous stuff. When if these people just started shouting their stupid views to the world, most people would realise that they're just stupid views.
Maybe that's the case. Maybe the case is that these people think that if you read J.K. Rowling's article, you won't think she's transphobic. And if you think that, that's not something that they want, so they won't send you a link to it. They'll just tell you that she's a transphobe.
Yeah, but that does imply though that it's people out there actually reading the information, absorbing it, thinking about the implications in terms of their ideological viewpoint and someone else's, and then spreading information based on that, which I think is very unlikely. What we're seeing here, it has to be more of an instinctual thing, right? I don't think there's any orchestration behind how people unintentionally confuse these two things. This is something deeper than that, where people are just it's the knee-jerk reaction, right?
I think they just don't want you to critically think. They don't want you to critically analyse something because you might come away with an opinion that's different from theirs. They want you to think the thing that they're thinking, and they sort of push that towards you. But so it's almost like we're seeing that across the board on social media mainly right now. You see it with musicians, you see it with bands, you see it with YouTubers, you see it with streamers, you see it with actors. It's for some reason, people follow these individuals and they put so much weight into what they're saying. You see just a totally random example, One Direction. Remember when they had such a big, massive teenage following? Yeah. Anything they said could have that opinion would have spread like wildfire through their fan base. You know what I mean? We need to be teaching people these days that the art that you're consuming and the people that are creating it, just because you like the art doesn't mean that you should religiously follow the creator. We need to separate these things in your mind, because if you start connecting these things, if you start saying that J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter kind of connect like that, people all of a sudden start putting so much weight into J.K. Rowling's opinion, when in reality she's just one person that has had a good idea.
Yeah, I obviously I totally agree with you, because this is basically the conclusion that I kind of think partly what we came to at the end of the episode we were talking about radicalization when it came to social media, which is kind of I think in a way a similar effect. It's one of these unintentional consequences of the environment, the digital environment we find ourselves in, and it's affecting us in a large way. And in this case we're kind of talking about how mob mentality becomes this new beast when it takes on the anonymity and the poor communication and the echo chamber aspects of the internet. So I agree that critical thinking is the solution here, but I just don't see how people are ever going to start doing that, because like it's one of those things where it's like it would be great if people thought about every ad they clicked on, and they thought about the information they were giving away by putting their details into a fucking farming game on YouTube, you know, like that would be great. But people are not going to do that ever, because critical thinking is hard. It's not hard, but you know, it takes conscious thought as opposed to mindless thought, which is not what
Sure.
people are doing when they're reading these articles, right?
Yeah, I'm getting the feeling now that people are consuming this content, they're consuming the art, you know, that people are watching Harry Potter and they're following J.K. Rowling on Twitter and she's tweeting things and they're liking it and replying to it. And they're almost forming like a social relationship, a one-sided social relationship.
A parasocial relationship.
With J.K. Rowling. And it's the same with like these like artists, like bands and musicians, and it's the same with like actors. Like, people need to realize that these people are not your friend. They do not care about you. Well, you know, they care about you as like as a person,
as a piggy
like an
bank
individual. Yeah, like, but they're not like in this for you. You're not like you don't have any sort of relationship past. You are entertained by the content that they create. Now, it's the same thing with it when, you know, with this Troy Leavitt guy. It's like, yes, you may consume Hogwarts Legacy. Yes, he will get paid for that. But no, he's nothing more than that to you. You know, all he has done is create a game that you're going to enjoy. And maybe he has opinions outside of that, but leave them outside of that. And if he is forcing them into that, that's a totally different issue. But the idea that these people are getting him cancelled before the game's even out, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think, well, it's kind of like, I guess it depends on where you're coming from. It's because in terms of talking about like people seeing a personality, I guess there's like two groups here, really, isn't there? There's the people that knew the personality before the outrage, and the people that jumped on the bandwagon once the outrage became a thing, right? So there's probably a group of people that once they realised that he'd made these videos in the past and it popped up on some social feed, they're like, let's jump on that bandwagon, feel better about myself. But it's probably also the people that knew of him already and perhaps knew of his work, and I think maybe that's where you're coming, where we're kind of talking about like this like conception of a relationship you have with someone that you don't actually have. Like, just because that person shares a viewpoint that you don't necessarily agree with, it's like, just because you know who that person is and you follow your work and you're invested in them, does not mean you have any fucking investment in their views, you know. So if someone starts saying something that you have a problem with, why would there be backlash because of that? But maybe I'm actually incorrect here, because I'm assuming that there are people that start the outrage in the first place. You know, are people that knew him and then discovered the videos and like they were hurt by this. They were like, no, he couldn't have, and then spread this information. Then the wildfire starts. So that's where I'm basically I was thinking my train of thought there was basically that it's almost the people at the beginning of this process that knew who he was and find these videos, that they need to make they kind of had to have the self-awareness and the critical thought to realise that what the roots that the connection they've just made are the problem. But that might not even be how this information spreads. There might be just nefarious people out there that just like look up people and try and find bad shit about them and spread it to the world just because, I don't know.
Yeah, it seems strange to me to want to cancel it, because you can't cancel an opinion. You know what I mean? You can maybe cancel the person that has that opinion, which I guess may send a warning sign to somebody else who has that opinion. But it seems to me like you'll get that person cancelled, but you know, somebody else eventually is going to come along that has that opinion. You know, especially if it's not an unreasonable thing for you to think. The people that are like trying to cancel it, they haven't even thought about what they're trying to do, because it would be much more efficient to teach people that these people are not your friends. They're not someone that you should let influence you in any way more than anybody else would, and to educate them on why these views are wrong. You know, use it as an example. You know, cancelling them doesn't necessarily do any of that, because you've got two types of people. You've got the people who also want them cancelled, or you've got people who either are not sure what to think or actually agree with them. And by cancelling them, you've actually convinced nobody extra that what they're thinking is wrong.
Yeah.
You know, so in effect, you've just ruined one person's one person's career, and you haven't actually made any impact.
No,
but I guess the dopamine rush is, oh, I've made an impact here, but in reality, you have not.
That's exactly it. I think that like you've only made one person better off at the end of the day, and that's yourself. You know, like no one else has become positive out of this interaction that you've decided to waste your time taking part in. You know, like you could have read about the issue, you know, further. If you like saw an issue that someone was talking about, you would have done more net positive to society if you just looked that up in the Google search bar and read a couple articles than it did to take you to agree with everyone else in the comments. You know, like there are things that people can be doing here that actually are positive, and this thing we see where people just kind of pile up on someone because of their views, it's laziness in the extreme, you know, and something that I don't think I'll ever understand, to be honest with you. But you know, I think we can both agree, you know, at the end of the day, that you can dislike someone because of their opinions, and that's absolutely fine. But being aware enough to kind of make the distinction between that and every other aspect of their life is something that people just need to learn, right?
Yeah, you can hear these opinions and like not agree with them, but you know, think about how many people this game would have made
That's
happy.
a good point as well.
You know,
yeah.
How many people has J.K. Rowling made happy in her life? You know, some of her opinions you don't agree with, and you can try to educate people on the reasons X, Y, and Z as to why they shouldn't think that, and more importantly, just tell people that they shouldn't hold her in like high regard simply because she had a good idea for a story one day. You know, just because someone writes a good music, a good song, doesn't mean that they have any sort of superior influence over you. You know, and you have to realize that these are like just one-way relationships that you have with these people, and you should take everything they say, like you take everything else everybody else says, with a pinch of salt, and just come up with like your own idea. Don't let these people influence you, and just because they think one thing doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the content they create, or they can't be a functioning member of society. You know, it seems clear to me that these things aren't hateful. I don't know if Troy Leavitt's was hateful, but there's no reason for him to be cancelled if he has these opinions. I think if they were truly hateful, we would know about it. You know, he would have been fired.
Yeah, it would have
if
been
he
much
was
more obvious.
Sexist,
right?
you know. It would have been much more obvious, but instead people are trying to get him cancelled. Whereas if he had been sexist, he would have just been fired. You know.
Yeah, I see. To be honest with you, there's probably something else to this whole concept of forming a relationship with someone that you don't know. I think there might be like some deeper ramifications there, because I think that's actually a super important point. And like, I think that it's just to say, I think that it is called like a parasocial relationship, and it's like one of these dynamics in which, as you said, it's just one-sided and it's really, really unhealthy, and people need to. I think there's probably something to like, instead of relying on others for opinions, there's just develop your own. You know, I think that's and I think a lot of people genuinely don't do that. They rely on others for their opinions, and now that I think we've talked this over, and I'm glad you brought this up, because as before the conversation, like I was really interested in where we're going to head with this, and I think for me it must come down to just the act of your own discovery, instead of hearing what everyone else is saying and just blindly tagging on to that.
Yeah, people need to be less like mirrors and more like sponges, if you know what I mean.
Like
you
that
know,
one.
not reflecting their opinions, but like taking them in, soaking
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah. Oh man, that'll be...
and just rinsing out the bad stuff, and then just move on. You know, you can enjoy the game, you can enjoy the Harry Potter books, but there's no reason for you to hold these people as like heroes, because they're not.
Yeah.
You can totally separate these things, and you should be well aware that you are separating them. And if they are trying to like push the message in their art, I think you'll know.
Well, exactly.
Like,
yeah.
You realise, you know, as we spoke about in the Star Trek, in the episode 1, we spoke about Star Trek Discovery season 3. Like, you can see it. It's like clear as day that someone's trying to push a message.
Yeah.
They're trying to sort of like point a finger in your face and tell you what to think. You know, and you know, just think about it a bit more critically, I guess. Don't hold these people in such high regard.
Yeah, and trust people to have a bit more sense, I suppose, on the very end of it. Yeah. Man, that was such a... Your issue, I think, was pretty straightforward and like just, you know, in the sense of what we're going to talk about, but Honestly, I think we started picking on so many strings there that we could have went down big tangents.
It's such a complicated issue that's
Yeah,
interwoven
very much so.
by like social media.
Mhm.
You know, it's like social media is like everywhere through it, and that's almost like it's like a topic that we touch on almost
All the
every
time,
single
that's
week.
right. Mhm.
Where it's like social media is just exasperating all these issues. It's making them so much worse.
Mhm.
And I think it's just because we're not set up to communicate on social media. You know, it's not the way in which humans are built, but it's like this advanced technology that's just sprung up out of nowhere in 15 years, and we don't know how to use it. We don't know the bad that is doing it.
Yeah, and everyone has availability to it, and it's free, and like you're basically handed it from, you know, from when it existed, or if you're a kid now, you're just handed it from the age of like 10. So like, this is social media, go wild. There's no rules, you know, like.
And it's like if you all you have to do is say something that a lot of people agree with, and you get a lot of gratification for it in the form of retweets and likes, and you know, whatever they do on the Instagrams, the Reddits, they update.
Update skeletons, I've heard something like that. But yeah, it's like, so it really does, like, like it gets you into this like dopamine cycle, and like I think there's a huge kind of addictiveness to giving your opinion online, particularly hearing like positive or praise, or like just this whole aspect of like putting someone in their place with like social media. I think that's something that's like it's causing physiological changes in our minds that people wouldn't get in real life. It's because it's not very often when you're talking to someone and they have opinion, you just fucking put them in their place. You know, like that doesn't happen very often. That's quite confrontational, as you said. You know, like that's
you'd have a discussion.
Exactly. So it's like skipping some of the natural processes that human beings go through when we communicate, and we've ended up in this topsy-turvy world where we have these crazy ramifications that are affecting like so many aspects of society. And yeah, man. Yeah, that's basically what we're here for, you know.
Yeah, and they're like condensing these like really complex thoughts down into like 140 characters. So they're having to
Good luck
chop
with
out
that.
bits of their argument.
Yeah.
When you think about the fact that people even do that in the first place,
Yeah.
it's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
I think it's even weirder that people do the whole part 1 of 7 thing. For fuck's sake. Yeah. That's
that's another thing. These tweets.
But yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what I've been thinking about this week, because I for one, you know, I'm a massive Harry Potter fan.
Yeah,
You know
exactly. Yeah.
I'm currently reading the books. I've read them. I think it's like the 6th or 7th time I've read them. I'm reading them just now. I will definitely play Hogwarts Legacy, and unless there was something unethical about the way the game was made, or the game was like specifically racist or sexist or something, I'm gonna fucking play it.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And I know who Troy Leavitt is, and I don't care.
Yeah.
Couldn't care less about his opinions. He will not influence me in any way, shape, or form. I'll play his game. I'll forget he ever existed.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way you have to be. Appreciate art for what it fucking is, for God's sake. Yeah, that was really good. I quite like talking about that.